Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us again this week. My name is Mike Vanoy with Assure, and today we're going to talk about the new stimulus bill, the $1.9 trillion stimulus package. But more specifically, we want to talk just about the small business impact. What is it that entrepreneurs, small business owners, executives in mid-sized companies, what do they need to know about this bill and how to plan for it accordingly? So I want to thank and welcome my guest today, Pat Keppel, our chairman and CEO. If you remember recently, Pat joined me in another webinar a few weeks back where we unpacked one of our more recent ebooks, the 2020 election impacts, where we talked a lot about this stuff and really, I'd say, made some forecasts about what we expected from a Biden administration and what that would mean for small businesses. And here we are 50 days into the administration, and we have we're pending our first major legislation that I think we need to unpack. So Pat, welcome.
Michael, I am thrilled to be here, and I remember the days when we thought millions were big numbers, and then we thought billions were big numbers, but now we're into the T's or trillions.
Yeah, I remember watching the news. It's more than a decade ago when the joke was, a billion here and a billion there, and pretty soon you're talking about real money. And I mean, now you use a T instead of a B. It's a little crazy, right?
It sure is.
Hey, Pat, before we jump into the main topics, maybe just some insight. So you shared kind of your thoughts when we spoke a few weeks back. Just not a political position, not red state, green state, blue state, nothing like that. But just what do we think the realities of the business climate are as it relates to policy, right, in the administration? Any just overarching comments on, say, this piece of legislation or the political climate in general before we jump in?
Yeah, no, Mike, I think that's a great question because I think we've had, kind of a round of stimulus and then a second round, sort of, and now this is the big grand plan. And what I would say, it's interesting, this third round, if you will, is really a much broader in scope. It's not only a individual that's hurting, it's not only a small business that's hurting, but it's also, targeted workers, healthcare, COBRA benefits, really kind of what I'll call a Democrat or moderate agenda that was years in the making pre-COVID. And what this does is really throw a lot of money. I call it almost my, the country's Oprah moment where, you get something, you get something, you get something. And this is, also at a time when the previous kind of stimulus efforts was due to uncertainty or even prolonged uncertainty because the political climate was fighting. This is on a backdrop of maybe certainty. And the certainty is when, not if, America returns to normal. And so we see that there's going to be a vaccine that's going to get flooded to us here in the second and third quarter. People are going to adopt that. And we're throwing 1.9 trillion into it with that certainty. Now, I think the uncertainty is how fast, and is it a month or couple months or quarters, but we are returning to normal. And to throw this kind of money at it at a time when we're returning to normal, I think is really the galvanizing force here around the stimulus, and it's unlike the other two. So that'll be interesting to watch it play out.
Yeah, I remember 2008 era, when President Obama came in and, a 900 billion, I think, stimulus, but that was mind-blowing numbers then, but that was spread over like a 3, 4, 5 year spend, right? And then all of a sudden round one came a year ago and it got injected into the economy immediately. So with all that uncertainty. So I think that it's interesting take that this is even bigger, but it is in an environment of certainty. It's impossible to think this isn't going to have, whether you're for it or against it, impossible to think it's not going to have pretty meaningful impact, right?
No, I I really believe it is, and I think that's where you're seeing, even the financial markets, right? You're seeing the 30-year bond market go up a point, point and a half here recently, and who's to say it won't start to heat up? I do think you'll see some other policy decisions come from this. Short-term interest rates haven't come up, but I would think that the U.S. is going to be focused on tamping down long-term interest rates while also juicing up short-term. So I think this is just one aspect of a policy and in a new government party that's coming in that there will be ramifications quickly coming off this stimulus. But we haven't even got to the stimulus, Mike. So I want to hear more about it.
You know what? So I got a screenshot from whitehouse.gov. No surprise, dated January 20th. Inauguration day, making the big bold declarations any new administration would. The usual approach we take, we try to be super tactical, on these weekly webinars to share the best advice we can for entrepreneurs. But the reality is this thing is so huge. I think I just need to kind of unfold some context, and then just if you can just give us some guidance. So I think just context, to the left, and I got to give credit. This is Wall Street Journal. They did some good imagery on this today. Should be yesterday, as we're reading through. And so the first stimulus bill, March 2020, 1.7 trillion. Just under $1.915 trillion back in December, and this one's 1.9 trillion. But the makeup is a lot different, right? So if you remember if everybody remembers back to March, there was two gigantic pieces of legislation: FFCRA, the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, which really impacted businesses because there was specific, and really especially in the payroll business, because you had to pay people for taking care of themselves or loved ones or family members who were sick or impacted by coronavirus. And so there's tax reimbursement consequences, pay code consequences, and then CARES comes along, and it's all about PPP, and PPP dominated the news and certainly dominated a lot of our discussions last year. And then come around at the end of the year, and some of the revisions to the law back in December, it was PPP or the employee retention tax credit, but now the amended says you can do both. So we're still kind of retroactively going back to some of this law that came in 2020. In just at a glance, everything to the right, it's a bit of an infographic the Wall Street Journal did on what's in the new one, the 1.9 trillion dollar act, presumably going to get signed. Maybe it's today, probably more like tomorrow or next day. It's all over, right? So top left, you got 16 billion in agriculture. Top right, 105 billion in healthcare. You got expanded tax credits. The biggest chunk is going to be direct checks, right? $1,400 in the stimulus checks. The very, very bottom left, grants for restaurants and bars and in some of these businesses who have been hardest hit. So some good news for businesses in those sectors. But the rest is really just kind of general small business. So we do expect this thing to become law. Could be today, could be tomorrow. So it passed the Biden administration day one, put the declaration, it passed the House end of February, passed the Senate. I'm sure you guys saw the news this past weekend, and just yesterday on the 10th, the final amended policy bill made it through the House again. So this thing's an inevitability at this point. But rather than trying to go through everything here, let's just focus on, I think, maybe the big three, Pat, that I think every small business owner, entrepreneur, manager really needs to be planning for. And part of this planning is not just what's in this piece of legislation. Of course, you got to be compliant in their short-term ramifications. But I think as much as anything, why I wanted you to talk to everybody today is your strategic thinking, right? So what's the longer-term play about how we should be thinking about these things? So let's unpack each one of these in itself. So unemployment, Affordable Care Act, and really healthcare in general, and then minimum wage. So first of all, changes to unemployment. So this is real world, right? So there's a $300 premium to each check for unemployment, and this has now been extended through September 6th. So, if you're a small business owner trying to, some employees may be making more unemployment than they are coming back to work. How should a small business owner think about this and plan for it? And what do you think happens after September 6th?
Yeah, no, I think, Mike, it's interesting because the framework of this stimulus bill is so much different than the previous. They were trying to inject $1,400 into every American quickly. This has that element of it, and that part worked, which was great the first time around. So they said, okay, let's do that again. But outside of that, it starts to become more person centric. And what this bill attempts to do is really reach what I'll call the have nots versus the haves. So some people have really done well in a coronavirus world, whether you're a company like Zoom, or you're a cleaning company, or other fast speed internet company. You've done well, and you've profited from that. If you were an experienced worker that was a knowledge worker that had a lot of years under your belt, and you could navigate kind of change, you did really well. But if you were maybe younger, first job, didn't have the contacts, couldn't meet the contacts, maybe didn't have a digital background, you struggle. Maybe you were in the restaurant industry, you struggled. Well, as a business, the good news is over time here, restaurants are open. The bad news is you might not be, if you're a restaurant owner, you might not be able to get a worker, or the economy is such that most younger folks that frequent restaurants or bars or barbers or dentist offices might not be able to afford to pay to go to those services because they're way underemployed, or they've been forgotten about. So when you think about the stimulus, it gets you $1,400. It gets relief to those restaurants and other areas that really dropped off a cliff as far as receipts. But as they reopen, now they can hire workers and they can compete for workers, because the first round was $600 of unemployment in addition to the state unemployment. Now it's $300. So, I think there was recognition that we probably paid too much the first time around. But more importantly, I think also is unemployment, those folks that were underemployed for so long, they might still be struggling getting a job. It gets them through the summer, and through September 6th, I think what it's a signal that says, hey, I think we will get back to normal. The economy, people have money to spend, and they'll have time to get a job again under an environment where the vaccine is more certain. The economy has people that now have money to spend with the stimulus, and they have time to get a job. So to me, that was very prudent. Now, from a small business perspective, you're not competing in a workforce where somebody gets paid maybe $1,000 a week to sit at home. It's a more kind of normalized competition approach, where they still get unemployment, but people want to be gainfully employed. In some cases, they're looking for a job because they haven't had a plethora of opportunities. And as we open up, small businesses are going to be in a fight for the best employees, and they're going to have people available. What I also think, though, is this bill attempts to open up the workforce, because if you think about it, if you were male or female and had a child and your partner worked with COVID, maybe that child is at home, maybe you need daycare, maybe you need to take care of that child, and it's become easy for you to take care of that person, but you don't have the money. Well, what this bill does is it allows credits for daycare. It allows credits for kind of helping you get back to work. And then also what it does is similar to the $600. where the first round unemployment was taxable, what it also does then is say, hey, we know this is your time of need. We're not going to tax the first $10,200 of unemployment benefits. So what it really does is address people that were underemployed or the have-nots through this crisis. It gives them a runway to get successful again, to get on their feet. It helps businesses as they open have options of people that have some money in their pockets to support them. And then it also allows for those businesses to hire workers, and those workers now have a reason to be employed, and they get some tax breaks to help them take a job again. So I actually think it's pretty well thought out. Now the question is, will the economy even begin in some avenues to overheat or inflation return? And we'll see how that plays out over the next couple of months.
Yeah, my suspicion. So this is obviously more targeted than the first time around. I think the first, a year ago, March, it was a mad race to just inject money into the economy, mistakes and all, the error to the side of speed. So this is clearly more targeted. But do you think there's going to be any pressure? So $300 instead of $600 for the federal premium on top of state unemployment benefits. That certainly softens. So it still gives a benefit to the unemployed individual. If I'm an employer, probably the pressure isn't quite as high on. I have employees who'd rather be on unemployment than actually come back to work. But there's still going to be some pressure there. So to me, this is probably going to have. It's realistic to think that small businesses are still going to be. This is going to almost put some false. How do I say it? It's the unemployment number is going to be harsher than the actual number, right? Because of people not being willing to come back. Any advice for business owners about how to think about recruiting talent in this new era? Because I suspect that this isn't going to change. And what happens after September 6th might be just the next new piece of legislation that continues this pressure.
Mike, I think we're gonna play this out quickly over the summer. I think what you're going to see is, first of all, you need the vaccine to reach kind of that herd immunity, et cetera, or really the opportunity where people frequent the bars, restaurants, sporting events, et cetera, and can return to normal. And I think you're going to see that, in the April, May, June, July, with increasingly frequency that we're going to return to normal. Then two, the stimulus money around the $1,400 in everybody's pocket, kind of the tax breaks, it's understood, whether it's the unemployment situation where people at least have some footing to either catch up or to continue living till they find a job. What I would say, in these cases, if you're a small business, I think you have a pool of talent ready-made right now. I would go after that talent and get the best of the best, because what'll happen is in May, June, July, I think what you're going to see is unemployment start to come down, and your chance at the best of the best is going to dwindle. And it's going to be tougher to recruit towards the end, or you're going to get the people that perhaps aren't as motivated, that maybe just don't see the incentive of working. I also think this opens up a workforce in that working mom now can work again, because she has the freedom, with the stimulus, where the kids go back to school, or she has the break with childcare and some of the tax advantages to be able to go to work again. And then as far as the younger folks that have been struggling, now businesses open and they have jobs, and they can get a better job than maybe they could 3, 6, 9 months ago. I also think it provides a safety net for them to get going. What I would say the danger is, if the economy does start to do well and you get certainty, the next package might not be there, or it might be in a much smaller scale. And I think, if you're a small business, I'd rather get this, I'd rather begin when the pool is plentiful and really get the right people in place, as opposed to waiting too long when the talent might not be there.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of where my head's at too. It's like cash is king, and you got to conserve money, and you don't take on any extra expense in times, especially in times of uncertainty. But as the light at the end of the tunnel gets brighter and brighter, and we get cleared towards timeline here, there is still you don't want to sound callous about it, because the stimulus, it really does truly help individuals. But from the business owner's perspective, there's still a ton of talent available in the market in a way that hasn't been for decades, right? And so I would say, if nothing else, at least be out there interviewing, networking, building those relationships. Just because you're not ready to pull the trigger and add staff or bring people back yet, it's never too early to at least establish those relationships, so that when you are fiscally able to, that you're not starting from zero.
I agree.
All right, let's jump to the next topic, Affordable Care Act, and I think you can probably expand on this one, Pat. It's more than so. There's some provisions in here about subsidies for ACA, but even broader than that, subsidies for COBRA. Maybe just talk to our clients and small business owners and entrepreneurs about, what you think, where this fits into the long-term narrative for healthcare in how it relates to business.
Well, I think it's a step towards, even national healthcare at some point. I think the Democrats have made no secret that they would like that. They passed the ACA and Affordable Care Act back in the Obama administration, and there's probably been some arm wrestling since of how wide that should be, whether it's national health care or to what population. Similar to the stimulus and similar to kind of the targeted approach, what the ACA implications or Affordable Care Act in the stimulus is to protect those, folks that have long-term, so COBRA, for example, the extended period helps that if you are unemployed, or you've had trouble and you've been on COBRA for a period of time, you have the opportunity to extend and have health care, because that's something that we don't want to leave Americans behind in the idea of health care, and perhaps we've done that over the last couple. So it's a nod to the pandemic is real. It's a nod to the job market. It has been tough, and we want to make sure the people that didn't have a job have an opportunity to get a job, but they're protected until they do so, or the economy turns to normal. And then also from a taxation perspective or tax credits, it allows the folks that haven't quite got on their feet to also be able to not only afford it, but also get some tax credits for it. So again, it's that series, the have-nots and the haves. If you're over 400,000 in income, you don't need a tax credit. But if you're just out of school, you haven't been able to land that job, or you're a working mother, but you've had a temporary leave the workforce because you're taking care of your kids, it's a nod to those folks to help them out during this time. And as we return to normal, now the question will be, will the policy stay the same? Will they come in, or will they expand? And I think from a political landscape perspective, you'll see in 2022, I believe, that the Democrats will want to make this the new normal, and that'll turn, perhaps into a little bit of a political contention as we look at the midterm elections.
Yeah, and I think part of what I wanted to talk about here is almost like hey, let's just get real, right? It's like, it's 1935 that the New Deal passed, and there are still people who think, we shouldn't be doing Social Security because they want a 100% free market, right? So whether you lean left or right, there are just certain realities of our society where this is an obvious trend, right? So regardless of your political beliefs, the more and more of this is going as a matter of government policy, not not the company who takes care of you for 30 years, or the union who takes care of you for 30 years. The shift really is here to government, right? So, and it doesn't matter whether you like that or love it. How should business owners be thinking about how to plan for healthcare as an expense, as a benefit to attract and retain talent, given that context, Pat?
No, Mike, I think that's the the $1 million question, and I think it kind of depends. As a business, what kind of small business are you? Do you want to lead with benefits, and do you have access to benefits that are above the crowd? So where you're seeing some of the financial service firms or some of the professional services, boy, if they can stand out with benefits over, an ACA or over kind of a standard protocol of benefits, they're going to do that because they have the ability from a profit margin perspective and the talent they're going to try to recruit to really stand out and have a benefit offering that the average American perhaps can't get is from a level of service. Now, if you're someone that is in retail or a industry that has tighter margins, and you have people that are younger and quite honestly probably healthier from a insurance perspective, now if you can offer plans that are high deductible plans where they can pay a smaller amount, you can get a lower charge as an employer. Well, now you can be very attractive to getting the employees you want on the payroll. They'll do a great job for you, and your benefit costs are lower, and they pay less. And then maybe they have a health savings account, which allows them that if they do have an issue that comes up over 5, 10, 15 years, they can take that money and help. Or some of those folks, you have an eye towards the Affordable Care Act and say, listen, I have a plan in place, and if the government does do an expansion of health benefits, well, great, then I can parlay and take that healthcare kind of insurance for my employees, and I can focus on maybe either my brand, my industry, other reasons that would attract those folks to come to work for my small business, whether it's a cool restaurant, whether it's a niche place that has flexible hours, or I can offer daycare or some other offering that makes it attractive to get the best employees to serve my customers. So I think you'll see a bifurcation. I think you will see kind of how big of a role the government will play. I think if you step back from it as a maturation of a country, we're still a little over 200 years old. We're going to get more and more pressure of being that either nanny state or that big brother or healthcare for all. Different political parties have different views, but clearly, we're offering more and more services so we don't leave anybody behind. And I think that's a trend for the future.
Yeah, and I think the way I would encourage entrepreneurs to think about this is, they're kind of forget this artificial ACA line of 50 employees, right? It's like, okay, as long as I'm under 50 employees, I don't have to supply benefits. In over that I do. Well, that might be a line in the law that's true, but why did companies ever start offering benefits in the first place? Well, it was to attract and retain talent. And so, I think entrepreneurs need to be thinking about marketing, but to their own employees and to their as they recruit talent, right? And so if you're recruiting young college grads, that's a big part of your workforce. Maybe tuition reimbursement planning is a really attractive benefit, right? Maybe if you've got a specific demographic that has 75% pet ownership, maybe pet insurance is a really smart thing. I think you got to get creative when you come back to the reason companies start paying for benefits in the first place, which is a talent play. Anything else you want to add there, Pat, before we
No,
go to
Mike, I think you're spot on. I think the other thing I would add to this too is the whole, however you want to, the gender equality. So if you have maternity leave and you don't have paternity leave, you might want to rethink that. I think you're going to see, a kind of, everybody has an opportunity. Everybody has an equal opportunity. You're going to see, the more gender neutral you can make your policies, that is going to continue to be a wave of either legislation or political correctness that as a small business you want to be aware of, because you want to attract as many clients as you can, and then you want to form your policies around who you're trying to attract, both from a revenue perspective as well as a talent perspective. And I think we've talked about it, Mike, at length on other meetings, but you want your employment brand, the people that you attract to work, to really coincide with your company brand. And if you can get those to coincide, the people you attract to work for the customers that you want to serve, boy, now you have a multiplier effect. And I think most small business owners don't probably think about that consciously, but the more you can marry those two up, I think you're going to have a lot of success.
Yeah, I think you hit on the head with the phrase "how you think about it." I think this is a mindset, right? So certainly we help clients, and we'd invite anybody on the call to become a client. We'll help you with compliance, right? So when you think about 11,000 tax jurisdictions, right? And so that's really hard to do, hard to follow. So you use somebody like us to help you keep "quote unquote" compliant. But I think HR law has always been viewed from a lens of compliance versus, hey, this wave is coming, right? So we're talking about a specific act it's going to be come into law this week, but these are mega trends that, forget about being compliant with them, get ahead of it, make it part of your culture, whether you love it or hate it, lean into it, so you can use how you lean into it as a competitive advantage. So, all right, let's take our last topic, looking at the clock here. So I think the biggest thing that was not in there, and this is a polarizing topic, right? There are people who feel really strongly both ways that this should or shouldn't happen. But again, it's pretty clear the trends of the marketplace, trends of, it doesn't take a federal government, right? There are cities and counties and states who do their own thing when it comes to minimum wage. What's your advice for entrepreneurs when it comes to minimum wage, regardless of the fact that it wasn't in this bill?
Yeah, minimum wage was not in this bill, but its time will come. So it's, again, I view it as not if, it's when. And I think this concept of bringing everyone along, you see it, and we talked about it in the first part of the call today, where we address the unemployment, we address job credits, we address healthcare, kind of paying for the cost. We want to get people back to work. We want small businesses to get working again. From a minimum wage perspective, it didn't make it in this bill. It's going to come. And if I'm a small business owner, I would want to be very proactive about, how do I stand out? How do I have an eye towards this? And if I can get ahead of it in a profitable way and in a way that's good for my business and the employees that I serve, now you're just that much further along. Because if you can stick your head in the sand and say, it's never coming, I'm not going to do it, but then it comes too late, or you become very reactive. I would be more proactive on it. What I would look for ways is, how do I automate? How do I pay people more? And then how do I expect people more? How do I get them more efficient? How do I look at some of the skills that, I can focus them on, and maybe automate the lower parts of those skills that are more redundant? So I think this is a trend that will continue. I think you will see both from a state level, a local level, and a federal level, that there'll be pressure to have a living wage. and to not leave any behind. And it's a matter of when, not if. So if I'm a small business owner, let's get ahead of that.
Pat, let's be really practical. It's because I think I think about getting ahead of it for a small business owner who might be operating on really thin margins. But I think two things. One, there's the jolt of, depending on where you live and what county you operate, state and county you operate, you're going to have different minimum wage laws. But 15 bucks, that could be a small jump, could be a really big jump. How should people think about starting to be ready to absorb that extra cost?
Yeah, I think what you have to do is really, first of all, you don't have to go to 15 overnight, right? How do you eat an elephant? It's one bite at a time. So you can look and make changes that kind of head in that direction, depending what city you're in. You might be already there, but in depending what city you might be a long way from there. So I don't think there's anything magical about that. I think what you really want to do though is plan for that, and then as you plan for that, you really look at your hours of operation. You look at how you can be efficient. It's a series of trade-offs. You look at your pricing power. You look at how you can automate things that potentially are manual. How do you maybe do more with less? How do you incent those workers to provide more value and less kind of routine? So I think there are ways in each industry to do that. You want to plan for it. And I think the businesses that plan for it and kind of stair-step their way into it are much better prepared going forward. But more importantly than that also, it doesn't always have to be money. You can pair that with flexibility of hours. You can pair that with work of home strategies versus at the office strategies. You can create kind of a value proposition to the employee that will allow you to meet the needs of the changing world while not having to do too drastic of things overnight, but ultimately have you prepared as a business and an owner and a workforce that when these changes do come, you're already a good way down on the journey to success.
Yeah, and I think that requires some pretty deep thinking, right, and some planning, because this isn't, this isn't just your lowest paid workers all of a sudden getting a bump, and what's the expense of that, how to absorb the productivity, the pricing, the P&L, but also what about those employees who are making $15 an hour today and aren't the lowest paid in the company? How are they going to feel about that parity all of a sudden? And what are you going to do about that? So there's a lot of planning that's going to go into this.
There absolutely is, because with just like all of this, right? The first stimulus that we came out early on last year versus this stimulus, there was a lot of thinking as we kind of are coming to prepare for this stimulus taking effect. The same thing will happen in some of these areas. But if I pop back out, some of that, whether it's the nanny state or the paternalistic view, you really think that that's coming as a country, and that follows, the older countries of Europe and frankly, even Canada has on their citizens. Two, you have that kind of no American left behind. So I think you're going to see a lot of legislation around that. I think you're also going to see, kind of the policy around, hey, this thing is once every 100 years. Boy, we got to get returned to normal, and we want to help people bridge to normal. And then I think you're going to see that everybody, the view that everybody gets a shot, whether that's college or potentially some college forgiveness of loans, whether you're going to see free college or somebody has the rights to a technical college. You may see legislation around that. So I think you have to plan for it. There will be an evolution. There'll be some consequences, and then we have elections. So if the worm turns, you may have different laws every 4 years or so. But I think for the foreseeable future, America's going to focus on how do we get everybody back to normal? How do we get people healthy? How do we provide tax breaks to businesses and individuals that really took it on the chin? And then how do we create a fair and equitable kind of solution so people can get started and not feel like they're digging out of a ditch that's too big right from the start? So those trends are going to continue for some time, and as business owners, we have to be aware of them. I don't think we have to overreact to them, but we want to tap into them so we can have success as a business.
Yeah, Pat, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insights. Next week, we're going to unpack a new, I'd say, looming topic. So we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, had a special guest, attorney Eric Green, who specializes in tax law, and he talked about what he's calling the pending tidal wave of IRS enforcement. As really there was a bit of a quiet period in 2020 around enforcement, partially just out of practicality of their own workforce and their, who's impacted by COVID, but also delayed by doesn't make the sense to enforce tax issues to people who are just about to get a stimulus check, and you have to undo all that work. So I would encourage you to, if you missed it, check that one out on demand. It's on our website. But we're going to continue the conversation because the problem doesn't seem to be disappearing here. So the IRS backlog for notices and lack of response, unreturned mail, it really is a giant problem that I suspect is going to take not weeks, but many months before this thing can normalize. I think the pandemic is going to have echoes that last for quite a while in areas just like this. So look forward to everybody joining us next week as we unpack that topic. And as always, we have our COVID resource center. So if you hop on to suresoftware.com/COVID-19, all the webinars just like this, anything that has to do with COVID, PPP loans, loan forgiveness, guidance from the Department of Labor, IRS, it's all there. So please take advantage of that resource. And of course, as always, this is what we're here for. We're to help small businesses, entrepreneurs grow their business. In the last year, hopefully the value we've provided in this series is helping people survive in some cases, but giving you the resources to find the talent, to build great teams that get behind your vision, and that you can save time and money and grow with our human capital management solutions. So with that, Pat, I want to thank you again for joining us and thank our audience for joining us. And we look forward to talking to everybody next week.
Thank you.